At sunrise, the Sahara looks like an ocean turned to stone. The sun rises slowly behind dunes as tall as frozen tidal waves, painting each crest honey gold before turning it red like burning embers. Wind sweeps across the desert, dragging thin ribbons of sand that drift like smoke. In the distance, caravans of camels appear and disappear in the shimmering heat like mirages. People say the Sahara is most beautiful in the brief moment before it fully awakens. Just a few hours later, that beauty becomes a giant furnace. Mauro Prosperi came here to run. In 1994, the 38-year-old Italian police officer stood at the starting line of the Marathon des Sables, one of the harshest races on Earth. More than 200 kilometers across the Moroccan desert. 7 straight days under temperatures approaching 50 degrees Celsius. Every runner had to carry their own food, supplies, cookware, and gear on their backs. The desert would provide water, but only barely enough to survive. Around 132 runners started alongside Mauro that day. He was no beginner. Since the age of 8, he had trained in the modern pentathlon, shooting, fencing, horseback riding, running, and swimming. In 1984, he competed with the Italian team at the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. After leaving professional sports, he felt as though something was missing from his life. Then one day, he read about a race across the Sahara. Some places are more than just locations. They feel like a calling. The first 3 stages went perfectly. Mauro gradually climbed to 7th place. The 4th day began beneath a sky so blue it seemed endless. That stage was 80 kilometers long, the longest and most brutal of the race. By 1 in the afternoon, Mauro had already covered 30 kilometers. He stopped to bandage the blisters on his feet, collected another bottle of water, and kept moving. A few minutes later, the sky changed color. A dark line appeared on the horizon. It grew larger, larger. Then the entire Sahara rose to its feet. A sandstorm. Millions of grains of sand came flying like bullets. They struck his face, his eyes, his lips, his throat. The sand felt like tiny nails piercing my body, Mauro later recalled. According to race rules, runners were supposed to stop and take shelter during a storm. But Mauro did not want to lose his position. He wrapped a scarf tightly around his head and kept running. And the Sahara silently remembered that stubbornness. 6 hours later, the storm finally passed. Mauro stood in an endless void. No flags. No race markers. No people. Only dunes stretching all the way to the horizon, like gigantic waves on an infinite golden sea. By day, the Sahara feels like hell. The ground becomes so hot that the air above it bends and shimmers, creating lakes that do not exist. Mirages dance in the distance, mocking the human eye. At night, it transforms into another planet. The temperature drops suddenly. The dark sky opens above millions of stars so bright it feels as though you could reach up and touch them. Mauro walked beneath that sky. On the first day, he ran out of water. On the second day, he ran out of food. He urinated into a bottle and drank it, remembering stories his grandfather once told him about soldiers during World War I. The following afternoon, a Moroccan helicopter flew overhead. Mauro fired a flare. He could even see the pilot's helmet. But the helicopter kept flying. It disappeared like hope fading into the distance. On the third day, Mauro spotted the ruins of a Muslim shrine standing alone in the sea of sand. It looked like a shipwreck stranded in the middle of an endless ocean. He stepped inside and realized he wanted to die there. He planted the Italian flag outside the entrance, wrote a letter to his wife, then took a knife and slit his wrist. Outside, the wind kept blowing. Above him, vultures had already begun circling in the sky. He lay down on the sand and waited. The next morning, Mauro opened his eyes. He was still alive. Nature has a cruel way of mocking people. His body had lost so much water that his blood had thickened too much to flow from the wound. Mauro looked up at the sky. Maybe it was a sign. Maybe he was meant to keep living. Inside the ruined shrine, he caught 2 bats and drank their blood. In the days that followed, lizards, snakes, and insects became his food. During the day, he hid in the shadows of dunes to escape the scorching heat. At night, he walked beneath a blazing galaxy stretched across the heavens. A local man had once told him, "If you see clouds, walk toward them. Clouds mean water. Water means plants. And plants mean people. On the 8th day, Mauro found a muddy pool. He drank every drop, then collapsed from violent stomach pain. By the 10th day, a miracle appeared. A cloud, a tiny one, floating near the horizon. Using the last of his strength, Mauro crawled toward it. Then he saw them. Dark figures moving through the shimmering light. A caravan of camels and nomads. The women, their faces covered by veils, knelt beside him and slowly poured goat's milk into his mouth. Mauro survived. Later, Italian newspapers called him the Robinson Crusoe of the Sahara. It took him an entire year to recover. In 1996, Mauro returned to the Marathon des Sables. In 2002, he finished in 13th place. Years later, people asked why he kept returning to the place that had nearly killed him. Mauro looked toward the desert and said, "The desert cast a spell on me. Because that is the Sahara. Beautiful enough to take your breath away. Beautiful like a dream. And just as merciless as death. In the morning, sunlight turns the dunes into waves of golden fire. In the afternoon, long shadows stretch across endless ridges of sand like giant swells on a sleeping ocean. At night, the sky fills with so many stars that people suddenly realize how small they truly are in the face of infinite nature. But behind that beauty lies a cold brutality. A place where a single sandstorm can erase every trace of human existence. A place where even one mouthful of water becomes the final thread of hope. A place where, standing between life and death, people discover how powerful the will to survive can truly be. In the endless sea of sand called the Sahara, Mauro defeated death itself with nothing but his determination to live. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle of all. If this story left you breathless, hit the like button so more people can discover this extraordinary journey. Share it with those who love exploration, travel, and stories about people pushing beyond human limits. And don't forget to subscribe, because out there in the world are still countless breathtaking places, unbelievable survival journeys, and true stories even more incredible than fiction, all waiting for us to discover them.